Snip, tuck, tuck, fold. Crease, tuck, tape.
It's not that complicated, Dad.
Wrap, crease, tape, twist, tape.
Ohio Lottery scratch offs make great holiday gifts. And play Holiday Bonus Millions with a 200 times multiplier and a $2 million top prize.
Fold, crinkle, crinkle, roll.
Plus, you can enter non-winning tickets in My Lotto Rewards for a second chance to win up to 1,000 times the price of your ticket.
Please crinkle, gate, fold, ring, curl, scrunch.
The best part, Dad? No wrapping required.
No tuck, tuck, fold?
No tuck, tuck, fold.
Give the gift of fun. Lottery players are subject to Ohio laws and commission regulations. Play responsibly.
Welcome to Mind Love, episode 287. Today's episode is all about getting your mind unstuck with soul-guided choices.
You know, sometimes we make a choice to add something into our lives. Sometimes we make a choice to take something away. In my experience, the times that I've tried to move towards something, I have forgotten to let go of some other things in order to accommodate for what's new. It's a constant dance of recalibration. You know, when you said, I didn't know until I did, I think that's a perfectly beautiful way of saying it. We make a choice, and while we might commit to it, we might be resolute to it in our mind, it takes a little while to actually fade into being, you know, in terms of the way we identify ourselves, in terms of the way we internalize how things are working. It's never just that snap of the finger.
Turn up your frequency with Mind Love. Bite-sized brain hacks for seekers, dreamers, and doers. It's time to give your mind a little love with your host, Melissa Monti.
If this is your first time giving your mind love, don't forget to subscribe to the show. Mind love is a habit, and the more that you give your mind that love and attention, the better you're going to feel about yourself and your life. Plus, it's really a win-win because more subscribers means Mind Love attracts even more amazing guests to bring you their wisdom. So don't forget to subscribe. Today, I am so excited to share a review from Kimberly E23, who says, I just recently discovered Mind Love and I can't stop listening. There are so many good episodes. I'm always learning something new. I love the preview snippet at the start of each episode. As soon as I hear it, I am hooked. I can feel good about giving my brain a dose of encouragement and love. Well, guess what, Kimberly? Today you gave me a dose of encouragement and love, so I am so grateful that you took the time to write this. And if anyone out there listening wants to be featured on the podcast, feel free to leave a 5-star review. How many times have you been stuck in analysis paralysis? Searching the internet for a good career move, weighing the pros and cons of having a baby, calculating the risk of quitting your job or investing money. What would it feel like if you just knew the right thing to do? If you could tap into your inner wisdom and feel guided by your soul? I used to trust everything and everyone more than myself. And probably for good reason. I did spend over a decade making terrible choices. Seriously, like really bad. Well, mixed with some good ones, but the bad did outweigh the good for a while. So I realized I clearly needed to do something differently. I remember the first time someone told me to follow my inner guidance. I was in a yoga class, and I remember thinking, I'm pretty sure my spirit guide quit a long time ago. Either that or she's habitually high because whatever so-called guidance I have access to sucks. But what I didn't realize is that I didn't know my own voice. What I thought was guidance was actually social pressure or family expectations or perceived obligations. And I say perceived for a reason. What I've come to learn is that most of the pressure actually comes from within ourselves. It seems like there's social pressure to be a certain way. Depends on your location, I suppose, but in LA, I definitely felt pressure to be hot and thin and keep up with the style trends. One of my best friends, on the other hand, could give 2 shits about those things and didn't feel the same pressure at all. So ultimately, it was me who agreed to the pressure. Now I don't feel pressured by the same things that I used to, but I've realized that there will always be new pressures that arise. Now there's all these pressures, again perceived, around motherhood and how to raise a kid. And I have to constantly ask myself, are these pressures even real? Or am I just comparing my life to someone else's? Or projecting my own insecurities? And yeah, every time I ask myself that kind of self-reflective question, it highlights another opportunity for deep self-work. But this whole life is a journey, and there will always be more work to do. And that's the beauty of it, right? Every day is a new opportunity to know yourself on a new level. It's this constant push and pull of self-discovery and self-improvement, but it all starts with that shift in perspective and a willingness, or even just simply an intention, to listen to your own inner guidance. It's learning to be the observer of your own thoughts without attaching to them. Learning what's your soul speaking to you versus what's your ego. So that's what we're learning about today. And our guest is Becky Vollmer. She's a speaker, yoga teacher, and creator of You Are Not Stuck, which is a movement that empowers people to pursue the lives that they most deeply desire. She guides a global community on social media that's several 100,000 strong, teaches online courses about empowerment and choice, and she leads sold-out programs that combine movement, breathwork, self-exploration, and action planning at yoga and wellness centers across the country. So 3 key things we will learn are why being stuck is such a misunderstood phenomenon, why we fail to recognize that we are actually stuck, and how to align our lives and make choices that internalize our new ways of being. Before we go deep today, I want to give you a little gift, and I want to give it to you every single day. It's called the Morning Mind Love. I know how life can be. You're all fired up after an inspiring episode, and then a new day or a new challenge comes at you, and it's just hard to keep up that energy. Well, the Morning Mind Love is kind of like an oracle from your higher self to help you start each day with a positive focus. Plus, when you sign up, you get 2 free gifts, a 30-minute binaural meditation and 30 days of journaling prompts to help you remember who you truly are. And it's all completely free. So join over 9,000 people and go to mindlove.com to sign up, or text the word morning to 33777. And now let's welcome Becky Vollmer to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, we've had a pretty wild pre-recording talk here. Short tidbits. Maybe not all the tidbits will come out during this episode. But I want to start by asking, what inspired you to tackle the topic of being stuck? Because I know it's something that so many people deal with.
What inspired me? Well, I think mostly so I could write a book and come on shows like this and have just the most amazing laughter before we start recording. In all seriousness, what inspired me to write a book on being stuck? I think it's because it's a phenomenon that I understood very deeply, having experienced it. But the vibe I got from other people I talked to was that it was a pretty misunderstood phenomenon that was happening globally. I found that when I made sort of what I consider my big first move to get unstuck, which for me happened with a job, after that, so many people would come and talk to me and say like, oh my God, you're so brave. I could never do that. And here I'm thinking, wait, what are you talking about? Brave? Like, nothing about this was brave. I've been hiding in a corner, scared shitless, drinking my ass off. My whole life is a facade. I'm not brave. I was desperate. And as I started to understand, wait a minute, there actually really is bravery involved here. And it comes in the form of choice to get unstuck. I was like, this is something I want to spend a lot more time digging into, because I recognized my experience was in no way unique. It's a completely universal thing. Happens to the best of us. And I just didn't want it to happen to anybody else anymore.
When I was reading your story, I couldn't help but think there's so many parallels to our lives. Just especially with the drinking part, the way you described it. I went in and out of drinking, and well, no, I was always in it, but it was just depending on how much it was. It was this constant decision to like regulate, cut back. And it was difficult for me because I had made a lot of progress. My habits in my 30s were not the same as my habits in my 20s. Yes, I could still easily drink a bottle of wine in a night, but I would regulate that and I wouldn't allow myself to 1 to 2 glasses. But it was rare not to have wine in a night. And if I wouldn't, I'd be like, well, why am I not? Is it really making a big difference if I'm not having wine this Wednesday if I had it on Tuesday and Thursday? So might as well just have a glass while I'm drinking. So I had made a lot of progress, and I had a public persona while I was still having that, still in that habit, and still asking myself, is this serving me? And knowing the answer, but justifying. And it was such a reflection of almost every big life choice that I made. Just sitting in it and feeling like I could regulate it. And it was like forcing will upon it, but it not feeling in alignment because it was taking so much effort. And then it was finally when I like just surrendered to the voice that was always there, that I was like, okay, this is what I meant to do. And it's still not always easy. I'm like close to 500 days in, I think now. And holidays are coming up, and I can feel myself wanting the mulled wine. Mulled wine is my favorite part of the year. Or like everyone having their glass on holidays, and like, no, just have a cider. But every time I come back, I'm like, I'm so glad that I'm still on this path. And so we do that a lot, though, when we're stuck in something. And I think one of the hardest things for me was to recognize that I was stuck. Once I even had a word for it, being in a rut, being in the same pattern, was actually a really epic, horrible, actually, but also epic mushroom trip that got me to see this cycle. And I was like, oh my gosh, it was so odd. And then I could see it, and I'm like, okay, then I kind of knew what I needed to do. But why do you think it's so hard to see what the things are that are keeping us stuck, or sometimes to even see that we're stuck instead of just, oh, I'm depressed, or I'm this, or I'm that? And it's just difficult to kind of get out of that loop and see things as they are.
Yeah, I think it's because most of the time we're so busy doing the things that keep us stuck that we're not stepping back far enough to sort of widen the aperture and get the big picture, right? I think there are probably three big areas in my life where I've made what I would call, big decisions to get, quote, unstuck. One was around that job. One was around my own drinking, and congratulations on your almost 500 days. And then the third area was in a marriage where I wasn't loved anymore. But as I was in each of those situations, like up to my neck in it, trying to make it work, trying to make the rest of my life work in spite of the job that was sucking me dry, or the bad habit that was slowly killing me, or the marriage in which I wasn't loved. I was just so in it that I wasn't able to see just how painful, how dysfunctional, how unhappy I was, because I was just trying to juggle everything to make it work. And I think so often, we take a step down any particular path, and then we take another, and then we take another. And then before you know it, I think we believe we don't have many other options than to just keep walking forward, that we don't really realize that we've got permission, we've got agency, we've got choices we can make where we can, first of all, just stop, and then maybe, take a look around, look left, look right, maybe look behind, and recognize that, wow, just because I've been walking this path, if I recognize it's not the path that's making me happy or fulfilled or aligned with the rest of my life, I actually could choose to move in a different way. And that is a very illuminating moment for so many of us, that we can choose something different.
We're all searching for something better in life, right? Better habits, better mindset, better relationships. But when it comes to hiring, searching isn't always the best approach. Instead of searching, why not match? That's where Indeed comes in. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. It's your go-to matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors. Their matching engine helps you find quality candidates fast. And I mean really fast. Did you know that in the minute I've been talking to you, 23 hires were made on Indeed worldwide? That's what I love about Indeed. It's like having a mindful hiring assistant. Instead of getting overwhelmed by endless resumes, you can schedule, screen, and message candidates all in one place. The platform actually learns your preferences, so the more you use it, the better it gets at finding people who align with your vision. And get this, 93% of employers agree that Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites. That's why more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide use Indeed to hire great talent fast. I just love that it keeps all of my hiring processes organized. I can do everything right there instead of having spreadsheets and notes and video call links. And listeners of the show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/mindlove. Just go to Indeed.com/mindlove right now and support the show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/mindlove. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. You know what's interesting about mindfulness? It's not just about being present in the moment. It's about being thoughtful about the future. We meditate, we exercise, we work on ourselves, all to create a better tomorrow, right? But there's one piece of the future planning puzzle that nobody likes to talk about. I get it. Life insurance feels heavy. But here's the thing. Just like meditation is an act of self-care, getting life insurance is an act of family care. It's about making sure your love continues to support your family, even when you're not there to do it yourself. That's why I want to tell you about Select Quote. They're one of America's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience helping over 2 million customers. Their licensed insurance agents work for you to tailor a life insurance policy for your individual needs in as little as 15 minutes. And here's what's cool. They actually reward you for taking care of yourself. If you're in good health, they work with carriers that could get you same-day coverage for up to $5 million. No medical exam required. And it's way more affordable than you might think. You could even get coverage for up to $1 million for as little as $20 per month. We just did this all recently after putting it off for years, and I can't tell you the peace of mind just from getting it done. So get the right life insurance for you for less at selectquote.com/mindlove. Go to selectquote.com/mindlove today to get started. That's selectquote.com/mindlove. I recently recorded an episode with former poker player Annie Duke. She was one of the best poker players in the world. And her newest book is about knowing when to quit. And it highlighted something that I didn't even really recognize in myself. So for a long time in my 20s, I had sort of adopted this mindset that I couldn't finish my goals. Like I wasn't the type of person to complete things. And I wondered when I had lost that, because I was back in high school and college. But trauma hit, and then I just created this new identity, and I just didn't believe that I could. And so then when I actually overcame that and learned to align with things, that's when I started, well, there was a long healing journey before starting Mind Love, but Mind Love was one of the first big goals where I was like, yes, this is sticking, and I know I trust myself, and it's because I did the work to really figure out what was going to be sustainable for me, what I wanted my life to look like, aligning it with who I am. And then there's been decisions I've made within where I'm like, well, I've made this commitment, so I cannot change it, because I'm not going to go back to being that girl that can't finish something anymore. And there was something about this interview where I was realizing there is a big difference between quitting something because I don't believe in myself and quitting something because I do, and that I know what I deserve, and I got clarity on what I want and what I will deem successful and what will flow with my ideal life. And that's hard to decipher. I think I needed that interview, and not everyone gets to interview awesome people like you and Annie Duke, where I'm like, oh, thank you for that coaching moment right now, because it's exactly what I needed to hear. So I wonder, what do you see most people getting stuck in? Is it the choices they've made, the choices they haven't, or a combination of the two?
Yes. yes, and both. I think it's the road we take where we get stuck in the muck there. It's regrets over the choices the road not taken and the choices we didn't make. So part of it might be this was the wrong choice, or this was the choice that I just let pass me by. Both can give us some indigestion. But I think you touched on two really important things in your question. One is being aligned with our own values, and two is figuring out what success looks like to me. And both of those things are critically important because, one, they're both personal, right? Your values are yours. Mine are mine. They're probably going to look different, maybe similar, but as it relates to our specific backgrounds, upbringings, traumas, circumstances, what part of the country we grew up, you name it, whatever the factors may be, they all impact. But then, so one, they're personal, but two, they evolve over time. Both our values and our yardsticks for which we use to measure success, they both should be evaluated and allowed to evolve over time. And when we don't do that, that's when we find ourselves trying to grapple with living with outdated values, outdated measurements. And we don't allow ourselves that chance to grow into what's next or grow into who we are now. And that, to me, is one of the biggest ways we stay stuck. But where we free ourselves is when we can, once again, kind of pause, stop, step back, widen the view, and just take the time to ask ourselves some really, leading, and they can be very simple questions, but some of the most simple questions can be the most provocative. How have I changed? What's important to me now? How has my definition of self shifted? How has my definition of important shifted? Or my definition of, what's more urgent to me now? What's more meaningful to me now? And if I can think back over my own journey in my 20s and my 30s, I was really caught up in ambition. I was caught up in all of the external measurements of success. So the amount of money in my bank account, the title on my business card, the brand of my killer stilettos. As time went on, as little people entered the picture, right? As I became a mom, as I started to get older and realized, wow, instead of having a whole life ahead of me, maybe I've only got, this is going to sound crazy, maybe I've only got 50 years left, as opposed to I've got 90 years ahead of me. My focus became much less on the external elements and more on the things that I knew were a little more important, but a little less in my control. Things like time, things like the strength of relationships, things like how I felt on the inside. I knew that those things were not going to be determined by external forces. They were going to be determined by the amount of effort and energy and attention that I put into them.
I'm in that period of life where I'm experiencing so many shifts. And so the last couple years have been interesting for me because I made intentional choices to have a baby, and I knew that things were going to change in my business. And so because I made this intentional choice and I knew things were going to shift and I knew I wanted more time with my baby and less time here, and I didn't expect to feel like I hadn't made the choice. Like when I was in it, I all of a sudden was like, I don't have enough time in my business and I'm doing this. Of course I want to do this. But what I realized is I was resisting my own choice instead of surrendering to it. And I don't think even that knowledge would have helped me. I think the experience of actually going through it was just necessary. And so I had to feel the resistance. I had to feel the surrender. And so I'm still kind of in that. There's still choices I'm making. I'm still shifting things, seeing what feels good, seeing where I do want to be more involved here, less involved here, whatever it is. But one thing that I found interesting is so often the things I think I want, once I experience it, then I realize, no, I don't want more of that. I actually need less of that. It happens a lot. Like I felt that with alcohol before. I just need one more glass of wine. Is that good for me? Yeah. Or I wish I had more money for more stuff. And then I have more stuff and I'm like, I just want less stuff. This is burdening me, or whatever it is. That happened even when I was traveling a lot. I was like, I just want to travel all the time. And then I was traveling all the time. And I'm like, actually, I just want to create a home. And so sometimes it's the decision and experiencing what you think you want, or what, at least that was for me, experiencing what I thought I wanted just highlighted that I didn't know until I did. I guess that is that ungraceful way of saying it. And what's funny too is because I have thought that I've known how to follow my inner knowing. Like I can get to that deep voice. And still I feel like sometimes it leads me through the path of resistance rather than the path of least resistance. And maybe that's just how I learn. Maybe my inner knowing knows that, or maybe I have more work to do and hopefully it'll get easier. There are moments where I do feel divinely guided and I'm like, thank you. I knew this automatically, but it's probably 50-50. So I'm curious for you, what's your process of getting to that alignment, of finding what you need? And do you find that you're right most of the time? And how do you recalibrate if not?
It's a constant dance of recalibration. Absolutely. And, when you said, I didn't know until I did, I think that's a perfectly beautiful way of saying it, because that's really what it is. It's all trial and error. And there's also, the idea that we make a choice and we might commit to it. We might be resolute to it in our mind. It takes a little while to actually fade into being, right? It's not just a quick, it's not a light switch that we flip on or we flip off. The changes that we experience are much more gradual to be able to, in terms of the way we identify ourselves, in terms of the way we internalize how things are working. It's never just that snap of the finger. It's a slow fade in and a slow fade out. But I think what we forget, at least what I know I have forgotten in the past, is, sometimes when we make a choice to add something into our lives, sometimes we make a choice to take something away. In my experience, the times that I've tried to move towards something, I have forgotten to let go of some other things in order to accommodate for what's new. So it's like, here's my plate. I might have 4 things on my plate already that I prioritize, that I value. And, but I also want to do this and make this choice. And so I add that to the plate. But now I also want to prioritize this. And so I add that to the plate. And I continue to do that until all of a sudden I realize, I've got 27,000 things on my plate because I didn't let go of anything. So in terms of the constant recalibration, it's an assessment of, okay, if I add this, wonderful, but that's going to realistically, objectively take this much time or this much energy or this much attention or this much currency or this much emotional bandwidth, you name it. So what am I going to either put on the back burner for a while? What can I deprioritize for a period of time? What can I let go of completely to make sure that this plate I'm managing is manageable? Yeah. Where instead, I think, again, I can only speak from my experience. When my plate is imbalanced, I'm using all these metaphors and I'm mixing them up. But when my plate is imbalanced, it's almost because the pendulum that I'm sitting on, maybe it had gone so far this one direction that when I say, nope, that's not working anymore, it takes all of that force and all of that momentum and it swings to the entirely opposite end. And then you realize, nope, that's not working either. And so you have to let it swing back to the center. And over time, that pendulum does that swinging dance where what it's looking for is center and balance and alignment. So you asked that question, how do I find the alignment? It's experimentation, trial and error, but done in alignment with what I've identified as my values for now and measuring it against the success yardstick that I've identified that is relevant now. And so I emphasize that now, because if we live in expectations of ourselves from yesterday, measuring sticks from yesterday, then we're not in alignment with who we are right now. And that's really the only place where we can live, is in this general moment.
Yeah. And I have found not only am I shifting these priorities and understanding my values more based on that life experience, but there have been times where I didn't understand what I thought were my values based on programming until I reached a certain milestone and it didn't feel the way I thought it should. And one thing I'm so grateful for is the work that I've done to be able to feel that misalignment in my body. Because if I was in my 20s, I had like zero mind-body connection. I had been cutting that off for so long, just numbing, that I didn't know how to feel that guidance. And so I probably just would have, I remember even times thinking like, this is happiness, and being like, why is it so uncomfortable? Because I didn't even really know how to recognize true happiness. And so there's so many things that we need to weed through, the messages that we get when we grow up, what our family values, what we think a successful life looks like. And so if we're not creating that from the inside out, that's what's guiding us. And then we're going by everybody else's principles rather than our own. And it reminds me of one of the phrases that you use in your book. It's a whole chapter around the indigestion of shoulds. Can you tell us what that means?
You know what's funny? We spend so much time feeding our minds, reading books, listening to podcasts, learning new things, but then we grab whatever's convenient to feed our bodies. And I get it. Life is busy, and sometimes a drive-through feels like the only option. But that's why I take Field of Greens. It's a greens powder made with whole organic fruits and vegetables. No extracts, no lab-made stuff, and just 1 scoop a day gives you simple, real nutrition. Field of Greens feeds your body with fruits and vegetables medically chosen to support your heart, vital organs, and immune system. And let me tell you something. Since I started taking it, I've noticed these little changes that show me how nutrient depleted I must have been before. Like the ridges in my nails, gone. My sleep, so much better. And my stomach just feels happy. You know that dreaded afternoon crash that has you reaching for more coffee or sugary snacks? Well, that's not happening for me anymore. When your body is actually nourished, it runs so much better. I've tried other greens powders before, but Field of Greens is genuinely different. The quality is next level, and you can taste it. It's become my go-to, especially on those days when my eating isn't exactly Instagram worthy, because we all have those days, right? And here's the thing. They are so confident that you'll love it too, that they offer a 100% money-back guarantee. That's how much they believe in their product. So I got you 15% off your first order and free rush shipping. Visit fieldofgreens.com and use promo code MINDLOVE. That's promo code MINDLOVE at fieldofgreens.com. fieldofgreens.com.
One of the phrases that you use in your book, it's a whole chapter around the indigestion of shoulds. Can you tell us what that means?
Yeah. Indigestion of shoulds is like when you just, I've got my hand kind of like right up to my throat. When you just had it up to here with all the external expectations and opinions. And it's like, you just can't swallow one more, right? If you do, you might explode. And I don't know about you, but I have felt that indigestion a number of times in my earlier years when, as you described, I wasn't connected with my body. I didn't know what it meant. I thought it was something I just had to keep swallowing, and just push on through. Over time, and I really credit my yoga practice with this. I'm a yoga teacher by trade, have been for, I've been practicing for about 20 years and teaching for about 15, kind of on the side of what I did professionally, which was public relations. Anyway, I credit my yoga practice for helping me slow down enough to get that connection in my breath and in my belly and in my whole body to understand that indigestion that I would be feeling is like just that, that bubbling up in your chest that you just kind of want to scream, that was something that I could address. I didn't know that before. I really thought that that's just sort of how life worked. You just do what people tell you. You sit the fuck down, shut the fuck up, and do as you're told, as opposed to thinking for myself to the point where I could say, hello, this indigestion really doesn't feel great. So I'm going to make a different choice. And now when I feel that, those feelings come up in my belly, or when my heart starts pounding, or when my throat is dry and I can't swallow, that tells me, that's an alarm bell that says you've had it up to here and it's time for you to take control. None of us have to live in that sense of indigestion. What we have to recognize is that that's going to require, kind of taking charge of that indigestion, that's going to require making some potentially tough choices. And with tough choices come trade-offs and consequences and boundaries. And if we are newcomers to those areas, we're going to have a lot of work to do in order to make stick the choices that we have to make in order to move closer to the life we want. So it's one thing to say, I feel this indigestion and now I choose something different. Making it all stick is an entirely different bit of work.
Yeah, I live my life as like my own guinea pig. And I was recognizing I was hanging out with one of my friends last night. We went to dinner over there, and I have so many things that I'm working on at once. I feel like I'm probably a little overwhelming to people. I'm like all of a sudden talking, yeah, well, I'm taping my mouth shut tonight. And like, wait, what? And I'm like, yeah, I've been mouth breathing. And so I need a nasal breathe. And then all of a sudden I'm like talking about magnesium bicarbonate, just all this stuff. And then she starts to get like, well, do you mind if I microwave this? And I'm like, no, don't I'll eat it cold. It's fine. Like just all these things. But it's taken me a long time to get to that point. And it's funny because it's one of the things I'm most proud of myself about, but also can be kind of insecure in public settings because most people just aren't like that. They don't live their life as like always making changes. They find what's comfortable and stay there. So I'm sure there's a balance I could find, but it's fun for me. But one thing that I've realized is that I need a lot of space and reflection with each change in order to make it stick. Like I talked about before how, if I meditate and I just kind of move on, at the end of it took me a really long time to cultivate a meditation practice because I would do it for a couple of weeks and then I just wouldn't find a reason to come back. And when I actually started to sit there for like 5 minutes after the meditation and like bask in the new energy, like, oh, this is peaceful. How did I feel before compared to now? What clarity did I find during that? And really just like sit in that and see what came to me, let my inner wisdom come to me and really hear what balance it brought or what positive attributes that it brought. Then the next time that I was thinking, well, am I just going to skip this? I don't have a lot of time. It's like, okay, yeah, it's easy to skip the meditation, but do you want to skip that bliss moment that because you're bringing attention to it, you realize it's the best part of your day? And so now I know that reflection is just as important as the habit change, because if I'm not sitting there like say you want to start doing push-ups or you want to sleep more or whatever, it's like, how do I feel now because of this? God, that feels good. Then you start to feel like you're depriving yourself if you don't do it, rather than that you're pushing yourself to do it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Your question reminds me of, there are two questions that I believe that each one of us ought to be able to answer at any one time. They're simple questions, but if we're not practiced at this, they're not necessarily easy to answer. First one is, how do you feel? Second one is, what do you need? And the best answers to those questions for me do not come from my head. They do not come in a moment when I've got, that indigestion of shoulds that we talked about. They do not come when my pendulum is swinging to either one of the extremes. They do not come when I'm feeling backed into a corner and I feel choiceless, like I don't have a way out. The best answers to the questions, how do I feel and what do I need? They come when I get still. They come when I can just slip into that most beautiful, comfortable place behind my eyelids. And when I can come to my breath, not just, kind of notice my breath, but when I am nothing but my breath. Because in that space, my conditioning dissolves, my fears dissolve, my indigestion dissolves. And I feel like I'm so bolstered by that inner wisdom, that place inside of me that is not afraid for all of the same reasons that my ego gets afraid, but that place within me that recognizes what I'm really made of And it's like from that space, there's no denying how I feel. And I don't question my answers to what I need. The thing that I have to remember coming out of that space is then to have the courage to carry it out. Because I really do believe that, we're all so scared. We're all so scared of doing the wrong thing, saying the wrong thing, making the wrong choice, and having to live with it, the ramifications of that for all eternity, which, thank God for study of yoga philosophy that reminds me of impermanence, right? That takes so much of the pressure off. But the opposite of fear isn't just courage, not to me anyway. To me, the opposite of fear is choice, not ego choices, not fear choices, those soul guided choices, the ones that come when we get still, when we get quiet, when the voice of our inner wisdom is finally allowed to speak. That's when we make soul guided choices.
I wonder if that works for pregnancy and digestion as well. So far it hasn't, but I have hope after this conversation.
Now that I'm pretty sure you need Prilosec, but
actually the magnesium bicarbonate is the first thing that's helping. I've been doing magnesium bicarbonate for 2 weeks. All of a sudden, the indigestion's almost gone. So fingers crossed if you're out there pregnant with indigestion. Just put a pin in that.
Fingers crossed. That's right.
But you're right. Like, I didn't start understanding what that meant to get in touch with my inner wisdom or soul-guided choices until my 30s. And I'm a yogi too. I've been doing yoga for 15 years. I'm a certified teacher, but I've never actually regularly taught as a job, but I still do it almost every day. And I really credit it to being a huge stepping stone for almost saving my life. Because like I said, I had no connection to my body. I lived in my mind. I was a wreck in my 20s. I had just experienced a lot of trauma and I had a really debilitating case of bulimia. So in order to deal with that, my whole strategy was just to numb whatever I could. I remember thinking I couldn't be alone with my thoughts, and I'd kind of make jokes. Oh no, I can't be alone with my thoughts. It's crazy up there, and like thought it was funny. And it took me like 10 years to be like, wait, that's kind of sad. Like the one person I have to be with forever is me, unless I continue to numb. And what kind of life is that? Then who am I even hanging out with? And so finding that alignment, like I said earlier, is still a process. It's still something I have to recalibrate. I can still find myself all of a sudden being like, why does this not feel good? Is it not comfortable? I thought I did this work to find exactly where I needed to be. And it's like, oh yeah, you did 4 years ago, but look how many things are different. You've actually been following your inner wisdom to get you to move out of the city and to a mountain town, to get you to have a baby instead of thinking you wanted to be childless forever, to get you to be married instead of thinking marriage sounds like prison. Like a lot of big shifts have happened in this time. So do you think that your values are going to be the same now that you've experienced what this other side of your choices are? And so with every decision that I make, I'm now realizing I need that stillness to go back and say, okay, well, now what am I feeling? Now, how do I find my values as a mom instead of as a single woman? How do I find my values now that I've stepped into 3 of them and think these 2 are still important? Are they though? Or do they start to feel like an obligation? And so that recalibration is always happening. And sometimes I make the wrong choices. I do feel like the more that I have the courage to step into it quickly instead of resisting as long, the more I just feel this flow of guidance instead of having to hit that point of like feeling stuck and feeling, I guess, just out of alignment. Instead, I'm noticing it. But I think it's the willingness to find that time every single day. And even if I'm finding the stillness, and I think it's for a different reason, like to reflect on my meditation, that is still the stillness that I need. What else comes up? And so I think another principle in it is that space is a time of allowance. And I used to have more expectations for it. Like, okay, I'm giving space for this right now. And now I'm like, no, it's just space. Whatever comes up. And then can I listen to it? Can I follow it? Or am I going to resist it? And what does it feel like if I just dive right in and I don't give in to the fear? Because that's what I think what I thought before was that resisting was safer. It was easier because I was there, but it's still a choice. It's still sitting in discomfort. It's just the discomfort that's not right for me versus the discomfort of starting something new.
Yeah, you make me think about the time I spend in my garden. It's funny, when I was a kid, my mother loved to garden. She used to always want me to come, sit next to her and be on my knees and deadhead the marigolds and plant seeds. And I hated it. I hated it. I hated it. I thought it was so boring and gross. And there was absolutely zero instant gratification to it. And now here I am. I'm approaching 50. And for about the last, 10 years, in the time that I've been lucky enough to walk away from the corporate experience and instead teach yoga full time, right? Which gives me a little more space. There are a few things that I love more than being in my garden. And part of that reason is because it reminds me to just slow down, be present, be reminded of the process and the seasons, and to appreciate each moment. Like right now, the flowers are in bloom. Wonderful. Now it's like this. Now it's fall and frost is coming. They won't be here tomorrow. Okay. Now it's like this. Now it's the dead of winter and nothing is growing. But I know it's not wasted time because those roots, those bulbs, those perennials, they're doing their thing to rebuild, and they will very soon emerge again. Now it's like this. And then in the springtime, when everything is so promising and growing so fast and the sunshine comes back and we all just are so thankful for the warmth, it's like, now it's like this. But what the garden reminds me of is it is never one and done. We don't plant the seed. It's not like we don't go to the local garden center, get our little, our 6-pack of annuals, put them in the ground, water them once, and then walk away for 2 months and come back to see them. No. If we're not there watering, weeding, tending, fertilizing, nourishing, they have no shot. They'll be gone. And so the wisdom that I take from the garden is the same wisdom that I try to apply in my spiritual life, in my regular recalibration of my values, my choices. Am I on the right track? It's doing the work of regular attention, visiting myself again and again and checking in. How are you today? What do you need today? Do you need a little pruning? Got it. Do you have a little too much sun? Can I move you to a shady spot? Are you getting enough water? That's our spiritual work in a metaphor. That's the work of being aligned with our thoughts, with our words, with our actions. I call it the think, say, do alignment. We've got to get in think, say, do alignment so that we really are living in a way where we can keep growing.
I love that. And for some reason, what came up for me is I've been cultivating a lot of things in my life, things that through the space, recognizing that I've always wanted or needed. And one of those was this feeling of security, of partnership. I've never really felt that until I got married because I was just an only child. I moved a lot. I've always just had this kind of stretch of loneliness. I've always felt super independent, times really proud of it, and almost cultivated my life more in that. I don't need anyone. And the older I get, that is just cracking open. I'm just realizing communities where everything is. It's what the message that I seem to be getting in almost every interview, which also tells me that the collective is probably experiencing that too, especially after the last few years. Yeah. But when I was reading your story about your husband coming out and saying he doesn't love you anymore and that he hasn't for a while, my heart kind of just broke for a second. It's like, what would that be like? But what came up for me, it was so interesting. I didn't expect, like, you know how sometimes you'll just get that thought and you know it's your inner wisdom. And I had this thought of yes, that would be heartbreaking, but that's not what your sense of security is built on anymore. It's not external, it's internal. And I'm curious, what was that process like for you? What did you realize from it? Did you feel like it was like sweeping your world out from under you, or did you have a foundation? And if not, how did you rebuild that?
Yeah, when you said you could imagine that was pretty heartbreaking, I can tell you it was. And for those who haven't read the book yet, the story that Melissa's talking about is 11 years into my marriage. It was a year after I got sober. My marriage had really started to disintegrate, but I didn't necessarily think it was. I didn't think at all that it was unsalvageable. I thought things had just been rough. You know, taking alcohol out of the equation, you sort of take away the anesthetic in a relationship, and things get revealed, and people get a little crunchy, and they butt heads. So I really thought it was something that we would bounce back from. My soul, however, I think it took her some time to evaluate all of the angles and then come to the determination that that wasn't something that we would bounce back from. The foundation that I had then was, really built around yoga philosophy and spirituality. And I thought I had a really good grasp on acceptance, but boy, was I wrong. I learned a lot of lessons around acceptance and non-attachment in that process that I don't know that I would have learned otherwise. And so in retrospect, I will claim that time as something for which I'm incredibly grateful, because without it, I don't know that I really would have learned what I had needed to learn. It's like with every, oh my gosh, everything's a teacher. Every heartbreak is a teacher. Every bit of contrast is a teacher. Every way that we respond to a situation is a teacher. And I only thought I knew what it was like to, quote, get unstuck before that moment. I think that was the universe's way of saying, there's more information I want you to have. And I'm incredibly grateful for it. And one of the things that I have relied on a lot, Melissa, when you mentioned the word security, that was always one of the things that I most needed in my life. It wasn't something I had as a young child. I really thought that I had it in that marriage. When that foundation was washed away, I realized that my security had to come from within. It wasn't until a little later that I learned a different bit of wisdom, which I still lean on today. It's something that I learned in the practice of centering prayer. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. It's a Christian tradition of meditation. In my yoga practice, I tend to do more of an Eastern tradition of meditation. We'll call this a Western religious tradition of meditation. And as part of that practice of centering prayer, there is what's called the welcoming prayer, which is essentially, it's a prayer of acceptance. I welcome everything as it is in this moment. And if I were to consolidate a few of the lines in that, I do it in a very succinct sentence, and it's a mantra. I relinquish the need for security, affection, and control. Security, affection, and control. And man, oh man, did I wish I had been introduced to that way of thinking decades ago. How much pain that might have saved my poor little heart, right? All of our poor little hearts. If we could just learn to let go of that need for external security, affection, and control, and remember that the peace comes from within.
Security, affection, control, and chocolate are my 4 favorite things. I got some work to do. You're so right. I love what you just shared. It's one of those things that I want to share with my mom. Our differing spiritual beliefs can sometimes feel like a wedge, but what my main goal has been for so long is to actually see the unity in it. It's difficult when one is religious and one is not. Not for me as much. Well, no, that's a blatant lie. It is very difficult for me sometimes. It's not difficult for me when I'm by myself and when I'm thinking about it, but it's very difficult for me in practice. And so I'm always looking for those things that can kind of unite the two and be like, no, see, there's so much in common. There's so, like, isn't that what we should always be doing, is focusing on what unites us rather than focusing on our differences? Just like focusing on our gratitude rather than focusing on what we don't have. And it's just such a simple shift and everything's the same, but it feels so different. And so thank you for sharing that. We have so much to work with within this episode. We've talked about values and fear and things like that a lot, but you brought such a beautiful storytelling light to all of the topics that I feel like we got to layers that even helped me understand certain things more. So I love to leave listeners with one thing to focus on that really grounds the material into their reality for the week. So if you were to give them a little piece of homework, what would that be?
Just to breathe, just to breathe. And as you're working on to breathe through your nose rather than the mouth. I remember when I was new to the practice of yoga, my teacher told me the nose is for breathing, the mouth is for eating. I was like, oh, but what do I do when I have what do I do when my nose holes are clogged? So thank goodness we have an option. But yeah, to try to breathe and to let that breath really go deep in the body. Not just to breathe up into the shoulders and the collarbones, where so many of us will feel it when we're tense, and not just to breathe across the sternum and the chest and the upper ribs, where we might think we're getting a deep breath, but when you try to breathe from there and you have that sensation of, oh God, I can't breathe. The trick is to really breathe from down into the belly, as you know, to do the work of learning about the diaphragm and learning the way that amazing muscle can change the entire experience of exchanging air from our lungs and the atmosphere around us. If we can just learn, all of us, to draw the diaphragm down, down, down toward the navel and let the totality of the lungs fill up with air, and then gently release from the belly, from the bottom up, and let the diaphragm just rise back up into the lower ribs and kind of expel the air back out. Oh my gosh, the benefits are so many, from how we actually feel in the body, in our cells, in the the chemicals and the hormones that get dumped into our bloodstream. That deep belly breathing can literally change everything. So that's what I would recommend as homework.
I love that homework. For anyone following me on Instagram, you know how focused I am on breath right now. I read James Nestor's book called Breathe. So good. And yeah, that diaphragm breathing, there's something that's been known a while and all across cultures is the perfect breath, which is 5.5 seconds in and 5.5 seconds out. And when you focus on that for a while, it just makes you realize how often we're just like doing these little shallow breaths and not giving ourselves what they need and what we need. And it kind of reminds me of the same thing we've been talking about, of that space. It's like creating more space, and the breath is perfect for that. I just need to tell this baby that he's taken up residence in my diaphragm. So just like, give me a minute. But we got this. So for listeners that are resonating with you and want to learn more about you and your book, where's the best place for them to connect?
Thanks for asking. Best place is probably the website. It's youarenotstuck.com. That's the same handle you'll find me at on Instagram or Facebook. And I hope people do connect with just the conversation and the book. It's been truly the joy of my life to be able to take all of the teachings that other people have given to me over these years, maybe kind of turn them around, put them through my filter, but then just to be able to share all of that good wisdom that I've been lucky enough to absorb and just kind of put it back out on a platter that hopefully makes it meaningful to other people as well. It's the gift of a lifetime. So thank you for letting me come and talk with you about it.
All of the links for this episode will be at mindlove.com/287. So your challenge for this week is to just breathe. And it goes further than just breathing. You know, we breathe every day. We kind of forget about our breath. It's the conscious breathing. It's getting back into your body. Because so often when we're pushed and pulled in different directions, it's because we're living in our minds. We're feeling that external pressure that, again, usually comes from within ourselves. We're perceiving that people around us, society has a power over us that they don't need to have. That power, you giving them that power, is an agreement more so than an actual real power struggle. So getting into your own body and taking a deep breath calms the nervous system so that you start to perceive reality in a new way. You realize that it's just me. I'm just breathing. It's just an expectation. It's just a choice. Regardless of the outcome, I will survive it. And from this place, you're able to actually hear your own internal wisdom. Not from the place of anxiety, not from the place of fight or flight, not from the place of depression or pressure. So breathing is such an amazing way to release that pressure, get back into the body so that you can tune into your soul-guided choices. And let me know how it goes. Reach out to me on Instagram at mindlovemelissa. If you love this episode, please consider sharing it directly with somebody or take a screenshot and tag Mind Love Melissa and Mind Love Podcast. I love seeing you guys share. You can also find all of my sponsors at mindlove.com/sponsors. And if you are not a part of the membership already, I'm going to just say that you're missing out. Not to put any pressure on you, but we talk about how mind love is a habit. And I know that so many of you have said that you're listening to all these things and it's just difficult to apply what you're learning. And I totally relate to that. And so that is why the membership is created, because it takes you through easy practices that you can either do in an hour period in a day, or you can spread it out into multiple practices every single day and really create your own self-care and mind love ritual. So that's at mindlove.com/membership. And that's all for today. So thanks for giving your mind a little love today, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks for tuning into Your Higher Frequency with Mind Love. Head to mindlove.com for a free gift to keep your vibes up until next week.